Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'm going to be reviewing Super Paper Mario for the Wii. Why this particular title, you might ask, of all the games I could be reviewing? Well, my best friend is doing a program known as Exodus 90, which is a Catholic program to help train men to become better Catholic men. And one of the requirements that he has to do is he can't play video games for 90 straight days. So I said, you know, is it alright if I borrow Super Paper Mario? Because I technically haven't beaten that yet. And he's like, well, it has a really good story, so I don't think you should sell it out just because Paper Mario 2 is better. So I said, alright, I'll give it a try. And try that I did. And as much as I'd love to summarize this review by basically saying, you know, that opening skit I showed with Merlina, where she says, were you listening carefully? That basically summarizes my feelings with this entire game. It's a game where if you listen carefully to this game's amazing writing, then you could ignore basically everything else that's wrong with it. Because Paper Mario 2, this is not. This is very much a Paper Mario spin-off of sorts. Sure, it looks like a Paper Mario game, and sometimes it has light RPG elements, but the word super in a title usually means, you know, either better or magnificent, in which case this is neither. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad game, it's just that it takes a while to get to the good stuff, as opposed to, say, the first two Paper Marios, which were more so of, it takes a while to get to the slow parts. So, allow me to explain. First off, as you might have noticed, this is not a turn-based RPG, like the original two Paper Marios for the Nintendo 64 and GameCube. This is actually a 2D/3D platformer with light RPG elements. Most of the time you control Mario on a 2D plane going left and right, and for a while feeling like it's a traditional Super Mario Bros. Game. However, pretty early on, you meet a being known as Bestovius that gives you the power to flip between 2D and 3D. And that's the game's central gimmick, is when Mario goes into 3D, he can basically flip the level so that he can see the whole thing in like a diorama form. I'll show plenty of footage of it because it's really hard to explain here. But suffice to say that the first couple of times that you use it, the level design is absolutely ingenious. What you might have originally thought were just hills in the background suddenly become a bridge to help you cross a chasm in 3D. However, this quickly overstates its welcome by about Chapter 2, as I feel like after the first couple of times you use this flipping ability, the game basically shoehorns it into every situation it can just to say, well, you gotta find some reason to play as Mario. I mean, the game's called Super Paper Mario, not Super Paper Heroes. So, as that suggests, you can play as 3 other characters besides Mario. I won't spoil who the 4th character is because you get them so late in the game. But I will say that Peach and Bowser actually join your party of all people. When you're playing as Princess Peach, you can't flip into 3D, but you can use Peach's umbrella to do a perfect shield from enemy attacks, and you can also use it to glide across chasms that Mario himself wouldn't be able to jump across. When you control Bowser, you move a lot more slowly, and since Bowser is bigger, it's easier to be hit by enemy attacks, but he's also the most powerful out of the group, and he can also breathe fire, which is usually very effective at laying to waste ground enemies that are hard to jump on. Overall, the game does a pretty good job of mixing up which heroes you'll want to play as, so that you don't just dominate the game with one or the other. Sometimes there are scenarios in which you're forced to play as one hero for a significant chunk of time, allowing you plenty of time to maximize their movesets and to realize, okay, maybe they're not a one-size-fits-all type of deal. In addition to other characters to control, because that's nothing new, both the original Paper Marios let you play as Peach, and Paper Mario 2 introduced the ability to play as Bowser. What about the partners? Well, they're sort of back. So in the original games, Mario would get a variety of partners that would provide him assistance in battle. Now that the battle is done in real-time platforming instead of a turn-based system, the partners have taken on the form of what are known as pixels, which are basically these really poorly drawn creatures that have bizarre manners of speech, and they usually serve a secondary purpose that any character can use. For instance, when you get the hand-shaped pixel known as Throw, which is a play on words of throw, very interesting localization choice there, that allows you to pick up objects in a distance and then hurl them at switches or other enemies. Again, the first couple of times you get these pixels, they provide for some really cool puzzle situations, but eventually they just become part of the gimmick. Basically, the game wears out its welcome with its concepts way too quickly, and just as you're starting to get used to them, then they start popping up again in increasingly less and less cool ideas. Now don't get me wrong, this game still has its brilliance sprinkled throughout the adventure. There are definitely some locales, writing scenarios, and characters that are interesting, but they don't quite hold up the entire game. In fact, a lot of it is bogged down by a lot of tedious backtracking, obtuse puzzle solving, and a lot of things just sort of being put there for the sake of being put there. Like you might finally get to the elder you're looking for. Then the elder will say, oh, well you have to find this for me and then I'll help you. So then you find the thing that you're looking for, and then the elder says, okay, well, now that I've helped you, now you need to go to this person to ask this person a favor because I just gave them permission to help you. And it just feels like you constantly are going back and forth, and I know that was a common complaint that people have against Paper Mario 2 when they're desperate to complain about it, but at least with that game you were backtracking to different worlds. On one hand, Super Paper Mario hardly ever has the need to do that. In fact, once I completed a world, I never had to go back to it, with the exception of the hub world of Flipside. On the other hand, they have as much backtracking from worlds as they do in one level here in Super Paper Mario, which doesn't sound bad on paper, no pun intended, but because it gets overused so much and the level design is not nearly as good as a regular Mario game, it ends up just feeling tedious to have to go through the same platforming drags over and over and over again. Not to mention that this was originally in development for the GameCube in late 2006, but once the design for the Wii Remote was finalized, development was basically started from square one, and they tried to maximize the efficiency of using just a Wii Remote. Now, this made for a very odd control scheme for me, because it seems like this game would have been perfectly fine with a nunchuck. Now, don't get me wrong, it's still playable with the Wii Remote held sideways. You know, with the game taking place in 2D, most of the time that's really not a problem. It just feels like you're holding an NES controller that's slightly longer. The problem is when you enter into 3D and when you try to get into the menus. First off, there's a lot of things you have to check and switch around in Super Paper Mario. You constantly have to be switching characters and pixels for the right moments, and there's not really a convenient way to do that. You also have to press 1 and 2 at the same time, which, to complicate things, 2 is the button that you use to make your character jump. 1 is the button that you use to use your pixels special ability. However, sometimes the game doesn't register that you pressed 2 buttons and only registered that you pressed 1. So a lot of times I would do something that I didn't mean to do, and I'm like, I'm just trying to get into the menu here. Why does getting into a menu have to be so darn complicated? In Paper Mario 2, you just pressed a button on the control pad, selected what you need, you're good to go, because the GameCube controller had more buttons. Even if Nintendo had gone with allowing you to play with a nunchuck, that would have made moving around in 3D much smoother, because with Mario being flat in a 3D environment, it makes it very hard to determine depth perception, figuring out where a block is supposed to be, or trying to land on another enemy that's in 2D in 3D. It sounds really confusing, and that's because it is. This game's combat felt like it was way harder than it should have been, because not only was it clumsy to try to attack enemies in 3D space, but even when you were in 2D space, a lot of times, because it was confined to the Wii Remote, there would be a lot of input lag, or the game just didn't flow as snappily as a traditional Mario game did. Sure, it's nice that Mario and friends jump a lot higher than they did in Paper Mario 2, but that purpose mostly serves for climbing up cliffs or hitting blocks. When it comes to the combat, that's easily the game's biggest undoing, because sometimes I'd want to make quick, snappy jumps like I would in a regular Mario game, but the game wouldn't allow me to because it was just programmed to be so darn sluggish. Now, if it sounds like I'm being overly negative on this game, I'm definitely not saying you shouldn't play it. Like I said, there are definitely moments of brilliance, especially the last 3 chapters of the game are just teeming with some of the most ingenious writings and concepts I've seen. Some of them may even marvel the creativity of Paper Mario 2. The problem is just that these bogged down puzzle platformer sections drag out the entire experience so much that you're basically just like, okay, let's just get this over with and move on to the next concept so that I can see what brilliant idea the creators have next. It's sort of one of those, like when you're reading a boring novel, you sort of force your way through it because you're hoping something good will eventually happen. And Super Paper Mario delivers that in spades. The emotional payoff when you get near the end is absolutely magnificent. Count Black, the game's main villain, because shocker alert, it's not actually Bowser that's responsible for the doom and gloom. He gets some amazing character development as the game progresses. He comes across as a one-dimensional, again, no pun intended, villain at first, but like I said, just keep on playing, and then you'll start to see that there is a deeper side to him. And I really wish Paper Mario games would explore this a lot more. While it's true that there are examples of that throughout the first 2, examples like that in this game are few and far between. Suffice to say that generally speaking, if a character feels flat, oh my gosh, when am I going to stop making these puns? They usually get much more development as the game progresses. So it's usually not a good idea to have a snap judgment about a character. Unless, surprisingly, they're the pixels, because they fall victim to having some of the least development. After you speak to them once to get them to join your party, with the exception of Tippy, none of them ever speak again. And granted, that's because Tippy actually has a major role to play in the story, and she's very different from the other pixels, but I wish maybe they had put even just a little bit of thought into, okay, if I bring Boomer instead of Thoro into this situation, could that have possibly provided for new dialogue options? I mean, the game does that if, say, you're playing as Peach instead of Bowser at a certain moment. Why couldn't they have done that with the pixels? They did that with the party members in the first 2 games, so I don't really see why that has to be a problem. Also, visually speaking, this game is going to be a matter of taste, because I personally found it kind of ugly. Like, it wasn't like laugh out loud terribly ugly, just everything was really blocky and felt like it was primarily pixel art instead of providing a truly compelling art style that showed off the extra horsepower of the Wii. I feel like if they had stuck with keeping this on the GameCube, no one would have noticed a difference. As I'm sure this could run beautifully on the GameCube, you'd have to make a few allowances for stuff like pointing the Wii remote at the screen to open up hidden passageways, which is also tragically underutilized. Guess they had to throw the motion controls in there somewhere. And not only that, but there are certain things that just perform worse than Paper Mario 2 did. Some of the animations for, say, even going through a pipe just feel wonky compared to the smoothness they did in the other game. And the game overall just feels like it moves slower, and they use lines and boxes for a lot of things instead of a truly compelling art style. It just doesn't seem like the graphical masterpiece that the Wii needed at the time. Granted, it doesn't look terrible by today's standards, as I keep saying, but in the Wii days, Wii games were not supposed to look good. Whereas Paper Mario 2 did a great job of showing off the GameCube's power. This game, on the other hand, clearly shows that it was designed with the GameCube first and foremost in mind, and they did little to no effort in trying to optimize it for the hardware. So, I'm kind of all over the place with regards to my verdict about this game. On one hand, there are so many brilliant moments later in the game, especially in the game's final chapter, that I feel like it would be worth renting this game for those moments alone if you're willing to put up with the mediocrity. However, before I played this, I actually was able to find an entire script of this game's writing online, and for over a decade, that script served more than enough of a purpose for me. I didn't feel like I needed to play the game because the writing was strong enough to handle it on its own. Now that I've actually played the game in my hands, only for like a handful of moments can I say, yeah, I'm glad I had the controller in my hand. Otherwise, I'd say just do as I did. Just find the script online and read it, because by far the writing is the best part of this game. While the gameplay starts out really clever and fun in the first couple of chapters, overall the actual game part of it just feels like it's drawn out in favor of the game's very novelistic writing. And the RPG elements are so small they might as well not even exist. So why the heck not just make this a book or a novel, something like that? So with that, I'm going to say rent it, give it a try, see what you will with it, and if you don't like it, then look up a script. Hopefully I can find one and put it in the description if I have the time. With that, thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, God bless, and don't make your jokes paper thin like most of my unintentional puns were this review. Bye!